Okay, Boker Tov and get started. Sorry, I'm a minute late. It's like say it's nice to be back. I've been giving sure nice to be back home to from our Makom Kavua. Okay, let's get started. Those who recall, okay, last week we did on Sunday on Spain's the Ramban. 2 weeks ago we were in the middle of the bracha of Selach Lanu Avinu, going through the Shmon Esrei. God should forgive us and. We left off. We were discussing the different types of sin: Chet, Avon, and Pesha. Chet is an unintentional sin. An Avon is an intentional sin. You know, the guy likes cheeseburgers, so he eats them, even though he knows it's wrong. And a Pesha is a spiteful sin. That the person really doesn't like cheeseburgers, but I know you are observant and I don't like you and I want to get you mad, so I'm going to eat a cheeseburger in front of your face. So that's a Chedav and Pesha. And we discussed sort of a pre-sin, if you can call it that, a mitasek. Mitasek means it's not even an accident. An accident means you're a little bit careless and you're walking by, you're talking to somebody, you put your hand on the wall, right on the light switch, and it goes off. So that's like you didn't mean to do it, but had you been really careful, it wouldn't have happened. So that's what we call a shogeg. That's like a unintentional sin. But sometimes it's so unrelated to you, it's not even considered a shogeg. It's not a sin at all. I know Zev was asking about that. That's probably in modern terms, and when you're walking on the street and the lights go on all over the place. So there has nothing to do with you really. It's true because you walk on the street. I mean, now people say that's okay, but mitasek means there's somebody out of the blue that there's no way you can control, had any way to stop what happened. Anyways, that we discussed, and then we'll come back to that, and that's what's going to be sort of our theme a little bit. And then we were discussing the second type of, I said, to spite. So we said a Avon and Pesha. A Pesha is a sin that a person is doing it lahachis, out of spite. But we said there's another type of lahachis. That's where we left off. That is the sin where based on principle. In other words, the example we gave, like a reform rabbi who doesn't believe in keeping kosher. So he's a very honest, wonderful person. He just in his set of beliefs, kashrut, as we mentioned, he takes the Rambam beyond the Rambam, where the Rambam says that kasher was a health measure. And the Rambam, as we've discussed, historicizes mitzvot a lot. That's one of the things that made him controversial. People didn't like that. Did that by sacrifice. He did that in a lot of areas. He had historical reasons. So people don't like that. What do you mean historical reasons? So when the history changes, then the mitzvot don't change. So the Rambam says no, even though they were given originally for historical purposes, they're independent. We have a lot of things like that, even though we have a red light, so there shouldn't be an accident at 3 o'clock in the morning and there's no car for 10 miles. You can't go through a red light. And if there's a policeman there, he'll give you a ticket, even though everybody knows there's no danger. Because once you put the law takes on an independent life. So the reform went a step further. They said, no, we like the Rambam, and we believe that when the history changes, where today we have refrigeration and kashrut isn't a health measure, so we don't have to keep kosher. That's assuming you accept the reason of the Rambam, and many people don't even like that whole reason. But anyway, so that's a type of lahachis. That's a type of lahachis where he's not doing it out of spite, like because he's a mean person he wants to get back to you, but it's out of principle. And that we discussed last week, and I'll pick up on that. I just want to leave one other interjection. That's a debate between Abaye and Rava. If that person can be a witness at a wedding, you have a wedding, can you call up the reform rabbi to be a kosher witness? Because you can't, everybody agrees you can't call up a crook, a guy who cheats on his taxes, that you can't call up because he's a mumar l'peyavan. You can't trust such a person. He does it out of lust. He wants to, that's what so that's a person who cheats and steals and whatever, and an adulterer, God forbid. So these types of people are for sure invalid to be witness. But a principled person whose principles are not orthodox, they're reformed principles. So that's a debate between Abaye and Rava. Mumar ochel nevelot. He eats non-kosher food because he doesn't believe in kashrut. Had he believed in kashrut, he would not eat non-kosher food. So that's a debate between Abaye and Rava. We'll come back to that in a second, and that's where we left off, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong, and if anybody corrects me, that's great, because I'm very happy. It means you were listening better than I was. But somebody asked me, we were discussing beforehand whether we discussed that we distinguish between a sin, between we're talking about the bracha on forgiveness. So you have to admit your sin. So we were discussing the difference between a sin between man and man and man and God. A sin between man and God is very hard to do, but you're supposed to publicize it. You're supposed to get up in shul and make an announcement. They did something wrong. It's a little bit a form of humility. It's a little form to embarrass yourself a little bit. It makes, as the Rambam says, it's a shevach gadol. It's great praise. It doesn't, if you don't do it, it doesn't mean that tshuva doesn't count, but it's not as good. You're supposed to announce it. But we said if it's a sin between man and man, it's wrong to announce it. I'm sorry. It's the exact opposite. I made a mistake. Man and man, you have to announce. Man and God, you don't announce, right? I spoke libel against you. So obviously I have to get up in public and admit what I did, right? Or I cheated you. Yeah, so even though I know everybody, but not everybody knows, I have to admit what I did. But I ate a cheeseburger when I went on vacation and nobody sees me and I am away from everybody. I didn't do that, by the way. I'm not a cheese eater. But that you don't have to admit between man and God. So somebody asked, what if a person, because of, let's say, the rabbi makes a mistake and he says food is kosher. This happens, I don't say all the time, but we all know this happens. The OU puts out a press release, whatever. Oh, that the label we have on this product that we thought is kosher actually isn't kosher. We made a mistake for whatever reason. That happens, it's going to happen in life. So the question is that a sin between man and God and man and man? So that's where we left off. And I said I had to think about it. Yocheved wants to say something, though.
Yeah, so just a question about the principled sinner. So could we call that sinning from intellectual reasons, not passion or
right,
anger, rebellion?
Intellectually, right. A person
So
who
does
sins out
this,
of lust, we cannot trust. Now, we often think that's worse to sin out of principle. Actually, what the rabbi is saying, it's better. A person who's a weak character, which is, I mean, everybody's weak to a certain extent. We all sin like that. We all gossip a little bit because it's hard not to. So that's a worse sin. In other words, I know it's wrong, but I do it anyways. A person who's a principled sinner, what the way I'm describing it, to put it sort of into modern terms, we can all relate to. Let's say a reform rabbi. So I'm not saying God forbid. I don't mean to criticize. Obviously, I believe the Orthodox way. The Torah is eternal for all time. But the reform rabbi doesn't believe in that. But he can be a very wonderful person and be a principled person. So
what if
Rabbah
he
says
doesn't believe in let's say
he
the
doesn't
Yud
believe in
Gimel
Torah Mina Shemaim. That's right.
right?
He doesn't
Let's say
believe
Yud Gimel Ikrim, right?
he believes
Okay.
the Torah was man-made. Okay, so what? I mean, what that makes him an evil person? It makes it, according to the Rambam, he's not going to get into the world to come. Okay, so that's fine. That's we discussed last week. The Rambam has a very strange definition of the world to come. We discussed that 2 weeks ago. The Rambam says an adulterer can get in, but a person who believes God doesn't have a body can't. It's very strange. We, I think, find that a little bit uncomfortable because we all know, and I'm not saying the Rambam even disagrees with this. The Rambam would agree an adulterer is worse morally than one who doesn't believe the Torah was given by God. But the Rambam doesn't see the world to come as this place where you get a reward for moral behavior. That's not the Rambam's world to come. The Rambam's world to come is this intellectual getting into Havdil, getting into, I won't say Harvard anymore, but into some great program and in some Oxford, becoming a Rhodes Scholar. So only people, you can be the nicest person in the world. They're not going to make you a Rhodes Scholar unless you have certain qualification. So that's how the Rambam views Olam Haba. You have to have intellectual perfection. In order to have intellectual perfection, which the Rambam was a big elitist, we know this, we discussed this, right? In order to have intellectual perfection, you have to believe in the 13 principles of faith. Many people, I'm saying most people, took issue with the Rambam. The problem, I don't know, maybe that's not the right word, but maybe it is the right word. The problem is today, the Rambam's view has become what defines orthodoxy. Doesn't have to be that way. Like, in other words, you can be a professor, maybe not anymore, but 50 years ago, 30 years ago. You'd be professor of the Jewish Theological Seminary, who's 100% observant. Davens at the Shul Lieberman's minion with the mechitza. The woman covers her hair. They go to mikveh. They teach at JTS, and they have certain beliefs that like they take the Even Ezra. We were there at the shir last night a little bit further and say, or Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid, certain parts of the Torah were added later, certain things that are today considered heresy, but in the Middle Ages were not considered heresy. You had rabbis who believed this in this. So today, that person would not be allowed to be a kosher witness at a wedding. Whereas a guy who drives to or he wouldn't be given an honor or whatever. The guy who drives to an Orthodox shul, he drives, he doesn't care. They'll honor him more. He's Orthodox. He's not observant. He's Orthodox. We have a whatever. We flipped the definition. So that's why don't be surprised. That's what I'm showing you. Rava says that the principal sinner, and I'm not talking about a moral sin. Obviously, that's terrible. A guy he believes in adultery. I don't think we would. Rava wouldn't extend it that way. But in things that don't that are just religious beliefs. So he has a different religious belief system, but he's an honest, principled person. Abaye says he's not a kosher aid. And it so happens Jewish law has accepted the view of Abaye in this case. I don't want to say, maybe you can quote me, don't quote me. In a sense, unfortunately, I would have liked it would have been nice if we would accept the view of Rabbah. But for whatever reason, as we'll discuss, the Yalkagam, since we're discussing it, let me show it to you now. I'll get back to the other question. Okay, just give me 1 second. We'll share our screen. And we'll discuss the Gemara in Sanhedrin. Why is not coming up? Okay. This is the Gemara in Sanhedrin, I think, if I can find it. Yes. Okay. Just an interesting Gemara. Hilcha, okay. Let's say like this. Oh, no, here it is. Mumar ochan avelat leteyafan. I think we discussed 2 weeks ago. A non-religious or whatever, a sinner, a mumar who eats non-kosher food. Nevelot means not slaughtered properly meat. It's a different feature. It's a behemoth. It's a cow. They didn't slaughter properly. That's an avela. A treifa would be a cow that was killed, was hunted. And that's a treifa, and a behemoth tmeya would be a pig. There are different types of non-kosher. And the vela means a kosher animal. And when they slaughter the animal, the knife wasn't 100% sharp. Okay, so and we can't eat it. It's an avela. So everybody agrees if he's doing it l'teyavon for lust, he's doing it because he likes it. You can't trust this person because you bribe him and he'll cheat in court. Everybody agrees he's disqualified from bearing witness. It is suspected he transgresses to justify his appetite. You're correct. Okay. Lahachis. Lahachis doesn't mean to spite because he's a mean guy. It's lahachis that I'm explaining out of principle. So Abaye says he's pasul. Abrava says he's good. He's an honest person. He's different principles. And okay, so then they have a whole discussion. And it comes after, this is what we have before. Abaye b'yal kugam. In all cases of Rava and Abaye, we follow Rava, except these 6 cases. Ya'al kagam. It's a famous, maybe not, whatever. It's an acronym. These are the 6 cases. I'm not going to go through all 6 of them, but I'll very briefly mention a couple of them. The Yud. How many Ya'al kagam? Right, in those 6 cases, who when they first started learning Gemara learned Bava Metzia, Elam Metziot? Can I have a show of hands or in the chat box? Anybody? When you first learned Gemara in grade 5, 6, or 7, what Gemara did you start with?
Elam Metziot. Right.
That's the traditional way. They start Elam Metziot. It makes no sense today, but okay, lots of things we do make no sense. As Rav Schechter told, I mean, it's not only me who say it makes no sense. And a lot of the modern schools, they don't do it anymore because it makes no sense. The reason we did it is because in Europe, that's one of the yeshivish's masechtot, we say. They learn because what happened in Europe, only 1% at most, 1/5 of 1% of the population went to yeshiva. Who went to yeshiva in Europe? Almost nobody. So they go to yeshiva. So who went? These were the elite of the elite. These were the super bright people. So they didn't need shiurim and so much in brachot. I mean, the Netziv and Velazhin gave shiurim all of Shas, but classically they gave shiurim on the more difficult Masechta, the more difficult tractate. So they didn't give on Megillah, they didn't give on Moed Katan, they gave on the Bavas, the three Bavas, the complicated cases. So that's what they learned in Europe. So Elam Mitzias, the Rosh Yeshiva, gave a topic because it's very difficult, very difficult. So when they came to America, no, this is what they did in Europe. They did in Europe, and now we're teaching a kid in grade 5 who can't read Rashi, and we're teaching Elam Mitzias. It's insane. But that's what they used to do. They still do that in some places, but a lot of places have changed. They learn sukkah, they learn more easy stuff. And then when they get a little bit older, they learn hard. So, but I'm from the old school. So I was in grade 7, Rabbi Trebin, I love Shalom here in Toronto, taught me in an associated Hebrew day school, co-ed, modern school, that I went to, and elementary school. And we learned Elam Mitzias, Shalom Ve'elach Chayav Lahachris. What happens when you find a lost object? When can you keep it? Because you assume that you find $20 on Fifth Avenue, walking on the street, you have no way to identify it, so you can keep it. You find 3 coins lined up on top of each other. Ooh, they didn't fall. Somebody put them there, so you have to announce it. Who did it? Whatever, whole thing. So we have there's a notion if a person would have given up hope, and you can keep it. So the guy who drops $20 on Fifth Avenue, he doesn't expect to find it. The guy leaves something on the cruise ship, when he comes back, and 2 weeks later he remembers. He doesn't expect to get it back. I don't know, or he drops his wallet into Lake Ontario. He doesn't expect to get it back. So somebody who is scuba diving can keep it. So we have a debate. What happens if I'm scuba diving and I find a wallet? But the guy who dropped the wallet doesn't know yet he dropped the wallet. He doesn't realize it fell out of his back pocket. So it's Yeush. He would have given up hope. Shalom Idat, but he doesn't know. He doesn't know to give up hope. So that's a debate. Can you keep that object? It's a complicated question. Yeush, Shalom Idat. So that's one of the 6 cases we follow Abaye. The other case I think was fascinating is Eid Zome Mikan Laba. This actually is very fascinating case, and this we can understand much better. A false witness. I won't get into all the technical details. A witness who's proven to be false. Let's say he gives false testimony in January, and in March we find out he's false. What happens to the testimony he gave in February? Does that get thrown out of court? You got married. He was your witness in February. He did the thing that invalidated him. He did in January, but we only found out about it in March. So in February, the rabbi called him up to do your wedding, to be a witness to the wedding. Are you married? So that's a debate between, is he invalidated retroactively or is invalidated prospectively? And one of the views actually that it's prospectively is because it will mess up life. In other words, well, everybody's got to get married again. You sign a real estate contract, so the contract's no good. The sell-out didn't go through. It'd be crazy. So therefore, whatever that's the reason why I should be going for it. And the one we're discussing is Mumarachal Nevelat Teyavon. That person is invalid. Rabbi says he is valid. Abai says he is invalid. He's not good, and that's what we follow. Oh, okay. Let me just take the questions on this part because it's not really connected so much. Okay, intellectualize to Ruchnius level, not intellectual alone. I don't exactly know what you mean, Bela. I mean, it has religious implications, but Mumarachal Nevelat means somebody who doesn't believe in what it says in the Torah. That's what it means. Are you saying lahachis is the same category as sins out of principle? Yeah, in this definition, I'm saying it. Lahachis, the way we say often on Yom Kippur, which we're going to get to now, it's Lanu, aviti, chatati, aviti, pashati, that's in spite. That's worse. That's terrible. But there's a second type of lahachis. The second type of lahachis is on principle. In other words, he's not a bad person. So there are 2 types of lahachis. That's what I'm saying. But what I've been talking about now is the lahachis is that is sinning out of principle, which is a good thing. It's we can respect such a person. We should honor and respect such a person more who's weak, who obviously whatever. That I think it has important implication, even though in practice we follow Abaye and we can't use the Reform rabbi least according to most people, or whatever. This is, you can't use a rabbi to be a witness at a wedding. At a wedding, it would be different for monetary cases. We won't go there now. Into a wedding. Still, the concept. It's not that Rav is wrong. Like, the concept is true. That's okay. Whether we're going to extend him to be call him up at the wedding to be the witness, that's a different story. But the idea that a mumar lahachis is better, everybody agrees is better than a mumar l'teyavan. The mumar l'teyavan is a guy, he just lusts. He goes after his desires. He doesn't have any principles. Okay. Lahachis usually implies God is not my boss. He can't tell me how to live. Yeah. Correct. That is correct. There are two types of lahachis. Right. That's what I'm saying. Rav Soloveitch said, inspiring Torah scholars should start learning Gemara's complex cases because it sharpens the mind. No, that's if you're a Soloveitchik. Most people are not. I don't agree. I'm sorry. Who am I? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Most people are Leila Mitzvahs in grade 7. They don't understand it. It complicates them. It's Rav Schachter. What I'm saying is from Rav Schachter too. He doesn't. He says Gemara Rashi's 9% learning. You shouldn't start on Rav Chaim Tosfot. The Maharal was very against learning Tosfot. There's a whole other classes we have to give on their educational theory. The way we teach education, I think I mentioned this before. When we asked Rav Schachter, I'm going back 40 years now, over 40 years, when I was in a shir, and we asked Rav Schachter. It was before he was famous. He didn't have a beard. Nobody knew who he was, but he was the guy. I mean, I fell in love with the shir. Wow, I never met someone who knew so much, who knew Kol Torah Kula, but nobody knew who he was yet. He was in his late 30s, early 40s. So we asked him, should women learn Gemara? So I know now what he thinks about women's issue learning Gemara. So he said, the answer he gave, maybe a little flippant, was, we've ruined the boys' education. Why do we want to ruin the girls' education? At least the girls, they learn Chumash and Machshava and Halacha. The boys, all they learn is a complicated Rav Chaim and this and that, and they don't get a decent education. That's added. After you would say Gemara Rashi's 90% learning. You didn't have to learn Tosfot, Rambam. That's all later. For the great scholars, when you're 22 years old, you can learn 8, whatever you are. But first get a basis. Ramosha Feinstein had a beautiful thing. I still don't think it makes it worthwhile. Rav Moshe Feinstein said the reason we started Elam Mitzias is, what are we teaching a Jew? We're teaching a Jew to return a lost object. In other words, let's look at the material we're teaching. It's complex, but the first thing we want to teach a Jew is his responsibility to another person. You find a lost object, you have to return it. So that's why we always start. He gave a moral explanation. Rav Soloveitchik, Fine, gave an intellectual explanation. But when you're Rav Soloveitchik, you think differently. Forgive me if someone says driving car is okay. No, if somebody says you're allowed to drive on Shabbos, like the conservative movement said, you can drive to shul on Shabbat, and only to shul. And I know that today sounds like totally, absolutely insane. So all it means is we can say they're wrong, but according to Rava, that wouldn't invalidate the person from being a kosher witness. That's what he's following his beliefs. I mean, it's not like they just woke up one day and said you can drive on Shabbos. They said it's a malacha she'ein tzrika l'guf. They had a whole halakhic argument. They didn't make it up. Okay, we don't accept those halakhic arguments, but believe me, there are plenty of things that we do in the Orthodox world that have very weak grounds halakhically. I'm not advocating anybody should drive, of course, obviously, and that ruined the conservative movement. I think conservative rabbis will tell you today it was a huge mistake. It was really it ruined the movement for all kinds of other. Forget the halakhic implications. You don't have to live in the same area anymore. It was a terrible, terrible decision. I'm of course halakhically wrong, but somebody who actually believed that, okay. So they believe it. We disagree with them, but we're not going to throw stones at them, and we're not going to tell them they're terrible people. We're going to say, we think you're wrong. You're mumar lahachis, and on principle, I understand your principles, but our principles are different. Okay. Rav Schachter put Mazid into context. For a Haredi and Bnei Brak Dusin is different. Same thing being done in small movements. Virtually no Orthodox with it. Yes, listen. I can tell you in certain, in Morocco, I believe people used to go on buses on Shabbos. What's the difference between a bus and a Shabbos elevator? You pay in advance, you get a ticket. I mean, there are all kinds of things people do. I mean, I spoke about it. You know, I was in Budapest, I guess now 4 weeks ago on Shabbos. 4 weeks ago, and we went to the Dohani Shul, and they played the organ on Shabbos. Now, today it's what we call a neolog shul. I wrote about that, but the men and women sit separately. But when the shul got started, it was what we would all think is an Orthodox shul. There was a mechitza, And even today, it's a complete davening. They don't take out anything. They don't do anything different except the men they play an organ on Shabbos. No, the Rav of Budapest in the middle 1800s said you can play an organ on Shabbos. It's not so a non-Jew, as long as it's non-Jew. It's not a difficult psak at all. I've said, you've heard me say it many times. I'll have to say it again. I'm sorry. The Shulchan Aruch, the Heilige Shulchan Aruch, the way that we follow our life. The Rav Moshe Isserlis, the final authority on Ashkenaz, says that when you have a Sheva Brachas on Friday night, you're going to have a band play, a non-Jewish band play, because playing a musical instrument is only a rabbinic prohibition, and tell a non-Jew to do a rabbinic prohibition for the purpose of a mitzvah is allowed. So playing an organ in shul on Shabbos really should be allowed. I'm not recommending you go to, this Rosh Hashanah. I'm not recommending that. I understand they're a social, communal thing. It became a terrible thing, but halachically, it's very straightforward. There's what's the big issue? It became a big issue because of the context. You're right. Context is very important. We live in neighborhood and the context and the reform and everything. But in theory, on a pure halachic basis, there's really no issue. I challenge anybody to show me that on a purely technical halachic basis, there's any prohibition to have a non-Jew playing organ in a shul on Shabbat. I'm not recommending we do that. You have to understand halach. We can't always look at what we do in strict halachic terms. Okay, let's move on. Let's get back to our brachot and okay, the sins. Okay, so we all right, that's halachit, but it's an important discussion. I guess the Siddur, everything's in the Siddur. Our belief system, everything we do can emanate from the Siddur. Okay, but let's get back to what we're saying. Aviti Pashat. The question they asked, if the rabbi says the food is kosher and it turns out it's wrong. So, but somebody ate non-kosher food because the rabbi made a mistake. Did I do a sin between man and God and I have to publicize it? Or did I do a sin between man and man and I don't have to publicize it? So I was thinking about this a little. I don't know for sure, but my gut feeling is it's not considered a sin against man. It's only a sin against God. Why do I say that? So the person who you go to a rabbi and you ask him, is this food kosher? And the rabbi tells you it's kosher. And it's not kosher, but he told you it's kosher. And you follow the rabbi. Did you do anything wrong? Why is it so quiet? Did you do anything wrong when you make non-kosher food?
No.
Do you have to do any tshuva? Do you have to repent for your sin? Anybody?
No, the rabbi does. No.
Right. So I'm not going to get into all the technical details, but we have like this notion of par elam davar shel tzibur. It's a parsha in the Torah and in Vayikra, where if the court, there's a whole tractate in Shas, Horiot. What happens when the Beit Din makes a mistake? The Beit Din makes a mistake and the majority of the Jewish people follow them. The people who follow them don't have to do anything. The court, the Beit Din has to bring a korban. They atone. And that's so if I didn't really sin against man, he didn't do anything wrong. I made a mistake. I made a mistake. So that's a sin against a sin against God. That's I don't have to go advertising that. I don't think I did anything wrong to the person. Now, the counter argument a little bit, I may have not done, again, the same way we're discussing here by the organ. We can't always look at things at a technical point of view. The person who ate non-kosher food because the rabbi told them it's allowed is not going to be happy. Matter of fact, that there is a Gemara that they often quote that the Afilu chamor shel Pinchas ben Yair, even the donkey of Pinchas ben Yair didn't eat non-kosher food. That there's God protects the righteous, that they don't do anything wrong. I don't know what that means exactly. So the fact that you did something wrong, even though it's not your fault, somehow means there's something wrong with you. Otherwise, God would have protected more. And they give the example, Pinchas ben Yair, he's the one that the Mesilat Yesharim, anybody read the Mesilat Yesharim, what do they call it in English? The path of the just, I don't even know what it's called. Ramosha Chaim Lutzato, the classic book in Musar, even though he was an Apikoros, but that's another story in history. They considered him an Apikoros at the time. Ramchal, Ramosha Chaim, today he's a big tzaddik, but when he was alive, he was a shtickle Apikoros. But the book shouldn't exist. They made him burn all His books, Mesilat Yesharim, should not exist, but they smuggled a few out, so it survived and now became the most important book. So that's why Jewish history is so fascinating. Anyway, so the Mesilat Yesharim is based on a statement, I believe, of Rav Pinchas Ben Yair, the last Mishnah in Sota, that there are 15 steps to come close to God. The Kiyus, Rizus, all these things, and the whole book goes through it. But so that's even his donkey wouldn't eat non-kosher food because God would protect him. So
Rabbi,
that's not a halachic concept. Yes, Bina, what do you want to say?
what about the rabbi who gave the wrong?
Right, so he did something wrong by mistake. Right, he has to bring. I mean, in time of the Beit Hamikdash, the court, whatever the Sanhedrin would have to bring a korban, but not the individual person. The individual person who followed the rabbi is doing nothing wrong. You're obligated to follow the rabbi unless the mission the rabbi is wrong. Yeah, you might know more than the rabbi. The rabbi may know more than you in technical sense, but he may not understand the reality of the situation that you understand better than he does. If you know the rabbi's wrong, that's what the Mishnah says. You know the court is wrong, you can't listen. But 99% of the time, you don't know the court is wrong. Doesn't mean you shouldn't veer from what the court tells you to the right and left, even if it appears to you. Rashi, the famous Rashi, this lots to talk about here. Even what appears right is they tell you the right is left and left is right. Then you're not allowed to listen. If they tell you right is left and left is right, you're not allowed to listen. Look carefully in Rashi. If you're near it appears to you that right is left and left is right. You're not sure. So then you have to listen to the rabbis. They know more than you. But if you know you can listen, but you have to do it quietly. But only the court brings they sinned, right? The rabbi did something wrong. You have to be qualified to issue a halachic ruling. You should be qualified, but mistakes happen. It's life, not the end of the world. So mistake happened. You bring a korban, but the person who sinned who ate the food didn't really do anything wrong. And before I take Yochevet's question, I'll just show you what I think the Rambam means. Although he sort of, I don't want to say, the Rambam says in this, what we discussed, Shevach Gadol, it's big praise, that you announce your sin in public. And you reveal your pisha'im. Pisha'im are your intentional sins. Or he doesn't say chatav. And, we're very precise in the language of the Rambam. So I think what the Rambam, if you did an accident, then maybe you don't have to announce it. It's only when you purposely did it, because it's a way to humiliate yourself a little bit. Although, so that's what I think. If you want to be very careful in the reading of the Rambam says you only have to admit in public your pisha'im, not your chatim. Although he does say in the last line, but this is Omer chatati leploni. I sinned to Ploni, because from Ploni, the person who ate the non-kosher food, because I made a mistake, he is, to him, it's an unintentional sin. He's going to feel bad, but it's not a technical sin. Anyways, that's what I think. I don't know people getting up in shul announcing their sins anyways between man and man, but I don't think, I think if you unintentionally sin and it's a byproduct. My sin, if that's not really the right word, my mistake was that I announced the food is kosher when it isn't. That's an issue between man and God. And it's the implication of the effect is something. I don't really think that's a sin between man and man. Okay, you'll have a quick question. Then I want to discuss about the order of the bracha.
Right.
I'm sorry, there's so much background here. I got to get into the bracha.
Isn't there also the concept that even the ritual mitzvahs are not these mechanical things that God told us to do? We may not know the reason why, but wouldn't we believe, some of us, that there's some inherent problem, let's say, in treifas? So even though I ate the non-kosher chicken by mistake because the rabbi told me, or there was that, remember there was a big scandal, by the way, a number of years ago, where thousands of people are eating non-kosher chicken. But and I'm not saying you have to do tshuva, but isn't there right? Yeah, or with any ritual mitzvah, we don't believe, most of us, at least I don't know, some people don't believe it's just arbitrary.
I don't think in rational Judaism, I don't think the Rambam would consider it that. I think in Kabbalistic notion, if God said not to eat this food, you ate it, there's something bad. But I don't know. If it's totally not your fault, that's not the approach I take. The approach, and listen, there's whole approaches, there's something inherently wrong with pork, and many people will say no. It's only wrong because God said so. That I think is the more dominant view. That's why the Rambam says that you should want to eat pork. If there was something wrong with the Rambam, right? The Rambam very beautifully and very importantly, and I think we mentioned this before, but it's very important. Rambam, the Rambam in his introduction to Pirkei Avot, I think in the 6th chapter, it's called in the Shmona Prakim is called the 8 chapters. I think this beginning of chapter 6. The Rambam makes a difference between Greek philosophy and Jewish philosophy. He says the Greeks believe that you should. What did he say? That you should never want to sin, and Judaism says no. You should only never want to sin in moral sins. I shouldn't say, I wish I could steal, but I don't steal because God tells me not to. That's better than stealing, but it's best to not want to steal. The highest is not to follow God. The highest is to have an ethical personality. An ethical personality doesn't steal. Forget God. If you need God to make you not steal, that's the second best. You should never want to steal. But the Rambam gives this example. But when it comes to eating pork, what's wrong with eating pork? You should want to eat pork. If I don't want to eat pork, I hate pork. So what's the big deal? I don't eat pork. What mitzvah did I do in the Torah? I didn't do anything. I don't steal. I'm a nice, honest guy. I don't gossip. That's great. I don't eat pork. Who cares? So the Rambam says you should want to eat pork. Say, I wish it's delicious. But what can we do? God says I can't. So obviously, if there was something inherently wrong, the Rambam couldn't say such a thing. The Rambam is a great rationalist. No, it's only wrong because God said so. Shatnes, there's nothing wrong with mixing wool and linen. I'm sorry. It's just because God said so. So yeah, after the fact, so wool is the animal and linen is the plant, and we like to keep separate. It's very nice, very beautiful, but it doesn't take away from the fact that, like, I can have that nice, beautiful idea and still wear a suit that has wool and linen in it. Like, it doesn't take away from that idea at all. So that's where I'm coming from. Yes, I'm Kabbalistic there. And again, today, I think this is the more dominant view. Today, Judaism is much more irrational than like the Rambam. The rationalistic approach to Judaism is less today. People, I don't know, do people still wear that red thing on their arm? I don't know. All this, to me, narishkeit. I'm sorry. God forbid if I don't mean to insult anybody if you do that. But I don't understand these things. I don't understand these things. I know what what it says. So I don't know. I don't know what that means exactly. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't.
Could I ask a practical question? That
Sure.
let's say you have a person who let's say the whole life they were someone mitzvah and someone okay. They unfortunately get to a stage in life where they have dementia, and they don't know from not doing
Right.
They go into a home.
Right.
And the food is not good.
So that's a question the Khatam Sofer dealt with a couple hundred years ago, right? You're asking somebody who has dementia, an older person, a young person, they're exempt from mitzvot. So I don't remember now the whole thing, but I believe it was a Khatam Sofer was the first one.
I think it's very common
about putting a kid. You have a handicapped kid, and this was, 19th century, early 19th century, beginning of modern science and stuff. So they had these institutions to help the deaf, the blind, different people, and the food wasn't kosher. It's not like today, you get kosher food wherever you go. So he was asked, can you put a kid in this home? And I don't remember his answer. I really don't. I'll try to look it up, but halachically speaking, a person who doesn't have knowledge, whether it's a young kid or somebody who's handicapped or an older person who unfortunately, is no longer caught.
I think it's
exempt from mitzvot. They're exempt from mitzvot. They can eat non-kosher food. It's not a problem. If that's what it's going to take to get them better, whatever, for sure, if it's going to take them getting better, that's allowed. But if it's not going to make them get better, that's the only place they have. They're in palliative care, God forbid, wherever they are. And there's no kosher place. It's not so simple in some of these homes. Easier than it was, and there are kosher ones, but not all of them. So I think, technically speaking, I'm not puskening here, but technically speaking, it's not really an issue. Not really an issue. That person is not obligated in the mitzvot. They're either cheresh, shota, or katan, even a minor is exempt from mitzvot. So you have no choice. It's allowed. Okay. All right. Let's I hope that clears up everything. I see somebody posted a link to the Mesilat Yesharim. I don't know what it's there, but you can take a look. And the Mesilat Yesharim is the classic rabbin, where when I was in yeshiva, when you learn Musar, that's the one book you learn. But the Ramchal has a fascinating history. Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. He lived in Italy, and I think he became an optometrist when they banned him. He was a Kabbalist. He was doing all these crazy things. He was single, and he was a Kabbalist, and the rabbis didn't like him. They thought he was very dangerous, and they told him he had to burn all his books, and they threw him out, and whatever. And okay, that's how life goes. Okay, let's get back to Selach Lanu Avinu Kichatenu, the three sins. So where should we start? Okay. I want to start with an interesting what we've been discussing Chedavon Upesha, the three sin. So I just want to show you something, and then we'll discuss it. The order and different places in our liturgy of how we ask for forgiveness for our sins. So this is the Mishnah in Yuma, which I just happened to learn also this week. Unfortunately, my wife's uncle passed away, and so learning Mishnayos, whatever, in his memory. And by the way, so Paro, the Kohen Gadol, comes to his cow. We're doing tshuva on Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol, this is what we repeat in the Amida, in Musaf, when we do the Shmon Esrei. So three times the Kohen Gadol did confession, once for his family, once for all his fellow Kohanim, and once for the entire Jewish people. The first two times were on his on his cow, his bull, whatever, and the third time was the Seir Hamishtalech, on the goat that they threw down the mountain for everybody. But that's how he did. He confessed. So I just want to show Ana Hashem. He puts his hands, Somech Shtei Yadav Alav. He puts his hand on the animal, and he says, Ana Hashem, please God, Aviti Pashati Chatati. So you'll notice the star was the worst sin. Avon is the sin lahachis, and now I'm going to say lahachis, not so much the principal sin, although maybe I think here it means more the way we classically understand it, spitefully, but maybe in principle too. We'll see in a second. Pashati, I did it intentionally, and chatati, and I did it unintentionally. So that of course is based on the Yud Gimel Midot, the 13 attributes of God, which is right here we say this, the Yud Gimel Midot, Hashem Arachum V'Chanun Erech Apayim Noseyavam V'Fesha V'Chata V'Na'akeh. So based on the Torah also puts God's attributes as he forgives our avonot, our pishaim, and our chatim. That's what we say. Now, if you go up a little bit, and okay, we'll come back to Marba Mechila L'Chataim, Ushlicha L'Poshim. Now, if you look at the Musaf, this and that, I just showed you what we do, what it says in the Mishnah, what it says in the Torah. But when we actually come to Davin on Yom Kippur afternoon, right, and we actually redo the avoda, we change the order. This is what the Kohen Gadol said. It's not what it says in the Mishnah. It says, I mean, most people, who cares? Like, right? But we should care about these things. Chatati aviti pashati lefanecha ani ubeiti. Right? This is the one he's saying for his household. For here we have the chet, the unintentional sin. Then he has the intentional sin, and then he has the rebellious sin. So the order is changed. So why is that? I just find that very interesting. Why do we change the order? So I'm going to say something that I seem to remember from, I don't know if he said it in this context, but it's, thank God I remember this, from Rabbi Meir Berglas. Anybody know Rabbi Meir Berglas is? Rabbi Meir Berglas taught me for 4 years in high school, and then he made Aliyah. After teaching me for 4 years in my class, he had to get out of Toronto. So he made Aliyah. We had him for high school, and then I was in Yeshiva, whatever. He was then, he worked in a Rot for, he founder of Midrash Moriah. And when I think he was sick for a while. I mean, he's not a young man anymore. He's maybe for some of you in New York will know he's Fabian Schoenfeld's son-in-law, if that means anything to some people. Anyway, so he taught me Mishnah for 4 years. We learned Gemara and when I was in high school, and I think it's great, and I love Mishnah, and I think it's more important than Gemara. For most people, should be learning Mishnah, not Daf Yomi. Learn Mishnah Yomi, whatever, a parak a day. But we did Mishnah in high school. So I remember Rabbi Berglass explaining the debate on the order between how we do our sins. Or do we do it from what sin is worse, or how it's easier to repent? From a sin point of view, obviously the chait, you're asking God to forgive us. So first he forgives us for our minor sins, our chait. Then he forgives us for our more major sins, avon, and then our rebellious sins, pesha. But if you're talking about how to do tshuva, what's the easiest sin to do tshuva from? To repent, not an unintentional sin. An unintentional sin is you don't know what's wrong. You don't know you're sinning. A person can do things. The intentional sin, you know you gossip too much. You know you cheat a little bit too much in business. So that's easier than the unintentional sin. It's even easier than the unintentional is a rebellious sin. The guy's in spite. So he's spiteful, but that can change. The unintentional sin is the hardest sin to change. So that's, I don't know, that's whether we change it. So maybe it's not a big deal, but I just find that interesting. Now the avodah on Yom Kippur, when we daven, we actually change the order from chait. We changed it to the chait, avon, and pesha, as opposed to avon, pesha, and chait. Avon, pesha, and chait. It's how do we do tshuva? And but we're asking for forgiveness. It's what's the lighter sin to the heavier sin? Now you'll notice one other thing. Okay, that's so now let's take a look at the bracha itself. Selach Lanu Avinu ki chatanu. God forgive us. Or no, God. Well, I know our Father. Our Father. That's presumably God. By the way, the previous bracha Hashivenu Avinu l'Toratecha, the bracha on tshuva and the bracha on forgiveness are the only two brachot in the Shemona Esrei where we refer to God as Avinu. We're asking God for repentance and forgiveness. So we have Hashivenu Avinu l'Toratecha. We don't say that by any other bracha. And Selach Lanu Avinu, forgive us our Father, ki chatanu, mechal lanu malkenu, ki pashanu. So we have to discuss why chait goes with the av and pesha goes with the king. And we also have to understand what the difference between slicha and mechila. So why don't we start with that? Because what's it? Selach Lanu Avinu ki chatanu, mechal lanu malkenu ki pashanu. What's the difference between, and we melech mochel v'soleach, right? That we say that on Yom Kippur a lot. I forget, mochel v'soleach lavonot amo Yisrael, right? That's the bracha. So what's the difference between mechila and silicha? Anybody? Nobody.
Maybe one bein adam l'chavero, one bein adam l'makom.
Which is which?
I don't know, but I'm just guessing.
I don't know either.
Yeah,
I want to hear. I learned. I don't know. One. I don't know. I don't know if anybody says that.
When we ask God, Erev Yom Kippur from our Avera, we say, give me a mechila. You don't say, give me a slicha.
You're on the right track. So what's mocha mean? Mocha means I don't exact the punishment. You owe me $100. I'm mochel. You don't have to pay me. Mechila means there's something owing, and you canceled the debt. So when we ask God to be mochel, we sin. We deserve to be punished. We ask God to be mochel us. God, do not punish us. Do not be mochel, just like a person's mochel. Right. So we ask our friend, I did something wrong to you. Please be mochel. What's soleach? What's slach? Slicha, Rav Soloveitchik explains, is basically sin has two impacts. You did something wrong, but it makes you impure. It ruins your soul. It has an impact. It distances you from God. How can you sin? A sinner, right? Avonot mavdilot, beinol lebeinacham, right? If you say tefillah zak, all the things in Yom Kippur we're distant, and we want to come close to God. Slicha is a much higher level. Mechila is basic. I forgave you. Um, but slicha means I've restored the relationship to what it was. Yeah, I can punch you in the face. I can owe you a lot of money, and you say, forget it. I'm not gonna fight. I'm not gonna take you to court. Okay, don't pay me back. You have a fight. How much money? We made some deal and it didn't go exactly as planned. So we have a fight. How much you owe? So I think you owe me 50,000, and you say I only owe you 30. And I said, I don't want to fight anymore. So I'm not going to fight for $20,000. Okay. I mean, depending who you are, but I'm not going to fight. I mochel you. But the relationship is strained. That's not a good thing. So mechila just means there's no punishment, but there's no relationship. So with God, we want mechila and selicha. It's very similar for those who've read Al HaTshuva, which I recommend. It's almost Elul. I mean, it's Tisha B'Av this week, but Tisha B'Av sort of gets us into, whatever. Calendar moves. The older you get, the quicker the calendar moves. The first one in Al Tshuva, the Rav discusses the difference in kapara and tahara. It's the same idea. Kapara is God atones, and tahara, God purifies. Melech, and we say that a lot. Kaperna, lavonot, to forgive, and a kofer is like a covering, right? Noach put kofer on the table. Kofer means you hide it, you cover it up. So when God covers up our sin, the sin hasn't gone away. It's there. It's covered. I'm not going to notice it. I'm not going to punish for you. We cover up the sin. Tahara is a much higher level, and that's why remember he gives the example there, like a gambler. When who's invalid for being a witness, because we don't trust gamblers, a professional guy. You went to Las Vegas once in your life. So that we assume you're not invalidated. You go to, I don't know, you bet on the football, who's going to win the Super Bowl, a friendly office fool. So that's a debate. Rav Avadia Yosef said it's forbidden to buy a lottery ticket. Okay, he felt all gambling is prohibited, but most people, especially if it's for a tzedakah, like all these schools do to raise money, then most people assume it's okay. But let's say even not for tzedakah, you want to buy, I don't know, what's it called, 649 in Canada. I don't know what's called in the States, lotto, whatever. And every once in a while, some guy wins $400 million, on a $1 bet. So is that allowed? So yeah, it's probably a bad idea because we know it's the poor people who gamble the most. It's probably a very terrible addiction. So that's you're invalid. A professional gambler is invalid from being a witness. An occasional gambler, maybe it's prohibited, but he's not prohibited from being a witness. When can the gambler become a witness again? How do we know the gambler did tshuva? How do you know an alcoholic did tshuva? So we know how do we know an alcoholic did tshuva? How do you know? I mean, the little I know, thank God, about alcohol.
He gets rid of the alcohol.
Right. He doesn't even drink alcohol on Friday night. Right. Alcoholics are not allowed to drink. Like they can't, on the 4 cups of wine, they can't have wine. They have to have grape juice. I went once to a Jack's conference. I don't know, what Jack's is, Jewish alcoholics and chemically dependent people. It was one of the most amazing, craziest Shabbos I ever had in my life. It was like more than 20 years ago. I was invited, my wife and I were invited to come to a Jack's Shabbaton in upstate New York, I think. And I was invited to come as a rabbi, and there were 300 people there. I don't know if there was anybody else besides me, maybe one other person who wasn't a recovering alcoholic. Even the rabbis who were there were recovering alcoholics. It was the most open thing. It was the most beautiful. It ranged from Satmar Hasidim to every Hasid, modern Orthodox, Haredi Orthodox, conservative, reform, secular, LGBT, all together, because they all shared this one problem of alcoholism. These are all recovering alcoholics. It's like and people just assume I don't touch alcohol. Those who know me, I have wine for Kiddush, but even on Purim, I don't think I'm Yotze with I don't like it. Whatever. So it was really an unbelievable experience, and so they have 3 different minyanim on Shabbos. They have the Orthodox minyan, they have the egalitarian minyan, and the why I don't go to shul minyan. So I went back and forth between the Orthodox and the why I don't go to shul, because I was very interested why people don't go to shul. And yeah, people in shaitos there, like whatever, saying, they became an alcoholic in shul. The Kiddush club make them an alcoholic. All the wine, all the alcohol they have in shul. I give Rabbi Billett tremendous credit for years ago for the banning alcohol at the young age of Woodmere, many years ago after a tragedy happened on Shabbos. But But it was unbelievable just hearing people talk. And they all begin, "Hi, I'm Bob. I'm an alcoholic, and I haven't had alcohol in 12 years." They define themselves by their alcoholism, which is the only way to. I'm no expert, but the only way to stay sober is you can't have any relapse. And so why am I telling you all this? Okay, whatever, because that's what the Rav says on Shuva. A normal person can gamble for fun. I can have a friendly bet with you on if the Leafs are ever going to win the Stanley Cup in our lifetime. That's I bet no, okay, and I'm going to win. But okay, we can have a friendly wager. But a gambler cannot have a friendly wager. That's what the halacha is. Only when he gets rid of all
of dovecotes or something.
Sorry.
I think it says he smashes the dove.
Right, he smashes things. In other words, not even for free. A normal person, a person who doesn't have this addiction, a person who doesn't have addiction can drink alcohol in moderation, beseder, maybe even a wonderful thing to do, maybe even healthy. But one who is an alcoholic can't have any alcohol at all. So it's the same thing in sinning. When you want to retire yourself from sin, you've got to totally divorce yourself 100%, from the sin. So that's the difference between kapara and tahara, where God just covers up the sin, or we are purified from the sin. Very different. But that's what we want to be. What's the pasuk? We say it on every time they're in the on Yom Kippur. First comes kapara, but we want a tahara. So that's the exact same thing with mechila and selicha. So God first so we have to do here. We ask for the Selach Lanu first. We'll have to discuss that next week, why it should really go the other order. But Slicha is to return the relationship to its purity, and Mechila is to forgive our sins, that we shouldn't get punished. Now, I'll just say one last point, or maybe I'll raise a question. Why does it say Slicha by a father, and why does it say Mechila by a king? Slach Lanu Avinu. Right? You have to remember the rabbis. They are so precise. We have to learn when we study Chumash, when we study the Siddur. That's what we try to do. Every word, especially in the Shmon Esrei, more so than the other Filot, let's say, perhaps. But the Shmon Esrei, Yanshe Knesset Agdola. I mean, Shimon HaPekuli, we discussed it, fixed it up 700 years later. But the Shmon Esrei originates with the Yanshe Knesset Agdola. We're going back 2,700 years. The people who established our traditions, and as we mentioned a number of times, many of the commentaries assume it's all based on biblical verses. All these phrases can be found in the Bible. Every once in a while, I point them up, but not all the time, right? So every single word. So why doesn't it say Slach Lanu Avinu or Mechal Lanu Avinu or whatever? So what's the relationship between Slicha and a father and Mechila and a king? Question is, I can leave that question hanging. You can think about it during the week. And maybe we'll do that. It's good. Maybe, and if it bothers you a lot, you can email me, or we can look up why it said that, and then we say Baruch Chanun Hamar Shloach. Okay, we'll come back, but that's what God is and then God is a mochel and a solech. Okay, let's just quickly review, and then I'll take any questions. What did we talk about? We talked about a long time between what lahachis means. Different one who sins based on principle. Can he be a kosher witness or not? And we discussed, even though he can't be a kosher witness, this is one of the 6 exceptions, Yal Kagam, where we follow abide. There's still something to be said for a sinner in principle that we're defining in the way we're doing it as a Reformed rabbi who doesn't believe in keeping kosher. He can be a wonderful person. Okay, we can't accept him to testify that the food, whatever, as a witness. For sure, you can't testify him on kashrut because he doesn't accept kashrut. But we can't even accept him at the wedding, even though in theory there's no reason to think he's going to lie at a wedding. So that's the one type of lahachis. That's a very different type of lahachis of the person who sins out of spite. And then we discussed a couple of the other examples of Yal Kagam, Yehu Shalom Idat, retroactive giving up hope of finding an object. So it'd have to return an object when it's retroactive. That's the first Gemara people learn. You can understand why that's not such a easy Gemara to teach 12-year-old kids, who that's like a very difficult concept, retroactivity. And we had that same debate by a false witness. Is his testimony invalid from the day he gave it? Or is it invalid from when we discover it? And there's a big difference. What happened to all the things he did in the middle? Okay, and then we basically we discussed Chedavon Upesha, the three different types of sin: unintentional, intentional, and spite in this case. And then the order in which we do, we saw that in the Chumash and in the Yud and in the Yom Kippur and the El Malei Rachamim, and we say Avoti Pashati Chatati, because we're doing in the order of how it's easier to repent. It's easier to repent from an intentional sin. I know I'm doing wrong. If you don't know you're doing wrong, you're not going to sin. And obviously, a principal sin would be very hard to repent from. Because if I believe in what I'm doing is correct, you're not going to repent at all. That's why it's a different type of lachis. Or what we do at the musaf, we flip it. Even though it's against what it says in the Mishnah, we tell chedavon upesha. It's easier to be forgiven for an unintentional sin, and we discuss, of course, that we spend another 10 minutes discussing that when I rule that something is kosher and it's not, and you eat it, you didn't really sin, right? You didn't. Yeah, is there some? I don't know if there's some impact. Obviously, you feel bad, but I don't. But at least from a halakhic point of view, that person hasn't sinned, which is why the court that brings does the atonement. But the person who sinned because he listened to the rabbi, there are exceptions. They're not important to get into it. And there's also what I didn't mention, very interesting, someone to distinguish between a rabbinic law and a biblical law. And this is very interesting. We'll end with this, that when I do a biblical law wrong, I mistakenly violated biblical. I did something wrong. It's inherently wrong because the Torah says don't do it. There's something wrong. Even though, right, we are accepting the view that it's okay to want to eat pork, right? It's good. You should want to eat pork because there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But if you ate pork, once the Torah prohibited it, of course, you can't eat pork. And then if you ate pork, even though it's a mistake, you probably did something wrong, even though it's not your fault. Not something wrong. There's something, this approach, something wrong. But when it's a rabbinic law, there's nothing inherent in the rabbinic law. The only reason we listen to rabbinic laws is the rabbi said so. So I did what I'm supposed to do. I listened to what the rabbi says. So then I didn't do anything wrong. The fact that the rabbis made a mistake, totally irrelevant. There's nothing inherent in a rabbinic law. It's an interesting idea that the biblical laws have inherent value. The rabbinic law is only right. What's the mitzvah to light Hanukkah candles? It's not to light Hanukkah candles. The mitzvah to light Hanukkah candles is to listen to the rabbis, and that's why we can make a bracha. The Gemara says, how can we make a bracha? God did not command us to sivanu. The Gemara says, Lo tasur. We did command you. I didn't command us to light Hanukkah candles. Command us to listen to rabbis. The rabbis told us to light Hanukkah candles. So there's no inherent mitzvah. That's how some interpret this. Very interesting. There's no inherent mitzvah to light Hanukkah candles. There's a mitzvah to listen to the rabbis. The rabbis taught you to light Hanukkah candles. So there's a mitzvah to listen to the rabbis. The rabbis taught you to eat this food. Straight. So what? I listened to the rabbis. They did what I did. I didn't do anything wrong. There's no biblical non-kosher here. Anyways, that's just interesting things to think about. Okay. Let me just quickly go through the chat box. Yes, so you say good to be back. Okay, we went through the hockey thing. Rav Shekh was amazing in the context right there. We discussed that already. Machti et harabim. Yeah, machti et harabim is a very bad sin. To cause others to sin, the Rambam says that you can't do tshuva from. Right, I cause others to sin. It's moni haha. Then it's very bad. I might repent, but what about all the other people I caused to sin? That's very bad. It's like lashon hara. Because I can stop gossiping, but the damage is done. Nobody reads the retraction, which is why perhaps we didn't even discuss this, which is when the Rambam says you have to get up and announce publicly your sins against man and man. I was discussing it up to now from the perspective of the sinner. It's humility, it's embarrassing, but there's this other side to let people know that it's not true. I said something, or I did something on a person, people are going to think negatively about that person. So it's very important. I publicize it. It's not true. But even when you do that, we all know it's not going to go as far and wide, and people aren't going to believe you. They're just saying it. So yes, you have to be very careful. Okay, I heard from Rabbi Breitowitz that the Bavas were the starting point because they're practical and concrete. I don't know. I think Brachot is much more practical. Megillah is much more practical. There are lots. Arvei Psachim is much more practical. I don't know, my ox goring your cow is not really so practical. Yeah, so you can send my Toyota bumps into your Honda, my electric vehicle. Okay. I don't think that when you learn the Babas, it's not so practical. And I don't think most of it. Baba Mitzia, maybe a little bit. Ela Mitzia, when with lost objects, maybe that's okay, that particular thing. But a lot of it, Hasochar to Umni, they fire you before you start to work. I don't know. I think there are many, many more practical things. Okay, somebody's writing to me privately. They met two elderly women who are Shomer Shova, but again to pre-order Wheeltron, taking to shul and home again. They can no longer walk any distance. They need social interaction. What can be done further? Yes, I think that's an important question. I think, again, I'm not a posek here, but there is room to allow an elderly person to go by Wheeltron. If I'm not mistaken, Eretz Chemda in their great books, Mara Habazak, I believe they have this question asked, and if I have to look it up, and they said that they can do it, but not every week, temporarily. I don't know. I definitely hear that. Have a non-Jew. It's like a Shabbos elevator. Someone who's 85 years old and they need that social interaction. I don't have a problem with saying they can have a cab take them on Shabbos. I think I once told you, maybe not. I love this story because it shows you how halacha is personal. Halacha is not abstract. Halacha changes. Two people can ask the exact same question, and the circumstances surrounding it will impact on the answer. So I have two friends of mine, one of whom they're both doctors, and they were both doing their residencies, and they both had to work often late on Fridays, and get out of the hospital at 7 o'clock or even 5:30 on Friday afternoon in the winter. Like, what are you going to do? They live 10 miles away from the hospital. So one of them, they both asked the same rabbi, and the rabbi told one of them they can go in a cab every Shabbos, and when they finish, just prearrange it and go home in the cab. Make sure get a non-Jewish driver drive you home. And my other friend was told he cannot do that. What's the difference? My first friend was married, was a woman, a mother with two young kids at home, and it was important. The other friend was a single guy. I mean, now he's married with 4 kids, but at the time he was saying, "Oh, it's okay. It's not so important. You can walk home." He also lived 5 miles closer, but it was still a long walk from the hotel. He lived a little bit closer, but I don't think that had any bearing on the decision. So but here you see, go in the car every Shabbos. So it's important to be home with the kids. So I don't see any problem with that, elderly women who need to go. And again, I told you a number of times the story, Rabbi Riskin, I heard it from him directly, where he was working with the community where the shul had moved. The shul was no longer downtown, or the shul moved, or all the people, I'm sorry, the people moved to the suburbs, so the shul was still downtown. They were all driving to shul on Shabbos, one of these, non-Orthodox to Orthodox shuls. And so Rabbi Riskin wanted to arrange a Shabbos where the bus would, go along Bathurst Street, whatever, and pick you up at the corner, like a Shabbos elevator, and says people wouldn't drive. It's great. It's a fantastic idea. Beautiful. And he went to ask Rabbi Soloveitchik, and Rabbi Soloveitchik said, to think about it, he said he would like to allow it, but he can't because of the conservative movement allowing driving. People won't understand. So that's a tragedy. That Rabbi Soloveitchik. I mean, you can argue, disagree, not disagree, but that you have to, in pure halachic terms, that's for sure allowed. So you have to know sometimes when does public policy trump halacha, and when does halacha say we don't care about that. So these are complicated questions, and that's going to depend on your worldview, and that's going to depend on a lot of factors. And that's why halacha is individualized. That's why you can't ask the rabbi on the internet these terrible things. Ask the rabbi, never do that. Ask a real rabbi on the phone. Okay. My daughter went many years ago to Mishresh Moriah. And the Berglasses were running it. Wonderful people. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, yes, Victor Berglass, yes, he was rabbi of Shart Villa here in Toronto. We're talking about that in history. So Rabbi Berglass replaced Beryl Rosenzweig. I'm sure many of you know Beryl Rosenzweig. That's Michael's father, rabbi in Kew Gardens for many years, who grew up in Toronto. So when Beryl Rosenzweig moved to New York, when Mayor Berglass came to be his rabbi and whatever rabbi at Shart Villa Shul. Okay, I guess for Torontonians maybe that's more relevant. I don't know. Okay, was Avram's choice to go to the Akedah rationally opposite? Oh boy, not now. Well, first of all, we'll discuss was it rational? That's a good question. Or the Kantian, right? So no, just simcha. So is our relationship rational? Okay, I think that's a great question, but it's too heavy to discuss now. But I'm just going to get rational. That's really, I think, is a debate, right? The suspension of the rational. Kierkegaard's famous piece that Rav Soloveitchik liked, that the suspension of the rational, it didn't make any logical sense. Or you even have today, you have people arguing Avraham failed the test. He shouldn't have gone. He should have argued with God like he did with Storm. Okay, that's already a non-traditional approach. But I don't think it's, I wouldn't call it beyond the pit. Like people are coming there and say wild things, but whether it was rational or not, I don't know. I don't think it's so rational. That's why Sarah didn't know about it, because there's no way Sarah would have let him go. Anyway, I mean that in seriousness. God commanded Abraham, he wouldn't command Sarah to do something like that. We ask Slicha from a father, it's a father's obligation to properly educate their child. So the sin is partial fault of the father. Okay, Morris will pick up on that next week. See, that's not what I was thinking, but okay. Remind me, I forget, there was one question I said I was going to look up. If somebody can remind me from the beginning. Now I should have written down, I forget. Somebody remind me. In my 8th grade class, your uncle, Rabbi Kelman, thank you, Abraham Kelman, yes, wonderful. The founder of Prospect Park Yeshiva High School, my aunt, shared a memorable story. He spoke about helping an Ethiopian girl who was converting to Judaism. During their conversion, he asked her if she had any questions about the faith. She inquired about the reasons behind the separation of meat and milk and kosher laws. Rabbi Kelman, that's my uncle, explained that killing an animal for meat involved an element of pain, while milking a cow provides comfort and happiness. Therefore, we separated two. Very beautiful. Very, thank you. Therefore, we separated two. My uncle was a great speaker, he was really the patriarch of the family. My grandfather, who I'm named after, passed away when my father was 9 years old. My uncle, Avi, as we called him, but Avram, he was 15, and he became the oldest of 6 kids, like the father, 6 kids. He was a rabbi in Toronto at the age of 19. He got smicha from Rabbi Price. Then he moved to New York, and he started Prospect Park. Right. Then we separate to acknowledging their different origins. I remember thinking especially what's the ability. Thank you very much, Bela, for that. Thank you. I greatly appreciate that. Okay. I think
Rabbi, before end, I think Monday or Wednesday we have the class about Echa, and the rabbi had a kina.
Yes.
The kina about the.
Send me an email. Yes, it's a beautiful kina. I already sent it to my shul. I think we're going to say it
can you email it to me? Can you please email it
yeah,
to
if
me?
I don't remember, remind me. Yes.
If not, I remind you Sunday.
Yeah. Somebody's asking me privately, how can we innovate if we base our decision on conservative? That's a very good question. That's why people argue we stopped innovating. The halacha has frozen. That's what I don't want to, that's a whole right. Many people have claimed that, I'll say it like this. The tragedy of the conservative movement, the reform movement, is many of their innovations would have happened if they wouldn't have done them. You understand what I'm saying? In other words, it could have happened naturally. You're right, because the conservative, the Lieberman Ksuva, for example, I'm convinced would be in every Orthodox Ksuva today if it wasn't done by Shaul Lieberman. It's kind of tragic, I think. I think that's a tragedy. I remember when I first came to YU, I think it was one of my professor of history told us that I was like 19 years old, says in the Orthodox community, what Jews do is they based on who says and not on what they say. And in critical thinking, we don't care who says it. It's what they say. You analyze what they say, which is the traditional way of psak, right? Kabel Ahmed Mishamro. It doesn't matter who you are. And we don't accept you based on authority. We accept you based on your arguments are rational. But it is very true. Today, arguments are, well, he said it. He said, who cares? So we feel, how can we argue with this rabbi, that rabbi? I don't know. Rav Moshe Feinstein writes in his introduction, I explain my reasons. If you like them, accept what I say. If you don't like them, don't follow what I say. So what he writes in his introduction, Igros Moshe, I explain, you don't have to accept my views. Your Rav Moshe has a beautiful tshuva about somebody who wants to give money to the Erev in Manhattan, his shul. And that time, Rav Moshe said the Erev is not good. Rav Moshe was a machmer Erev. He wants to know, can he contribute? Rav Moshe, of course he can contribute. I think the Erev is no good, but I'm not the only rabbi. The rabbi in your shul thinks the Erev is good. That's fine. You're totally entitled to follow your rabbi. We don't have people like this anymore. So unfortunately, we live in a polarized generation in politics and religion and everything. It's very sad, very tragic. You're right. So, I mean, sometimes we don't live in a vacuum. So we do have to, it's not that the Gemara does talk about public policy issues. It is, So there, it's not that it's totally, but you're right, it's a problem. If we're always worried what the conservative reform are going to say, what the Haredim are going to say, it's not a good situation. I totally agree with you. We shouldn't even care what others say. Correct. I agree. Once the innovation of services by lives was not to COVID, my one argue to continue this way. So that COVID thing killed the conservative movement. That was the nail in the coffin, I think. I mean, what do I know? But the Orthodox never really allowed COVID. Some of the Sephardi poskim did, but none of the major Ashkenazi poskim. At the time, people thought they should. But in retrospect, I think it was the conservative was half dead, which is a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's not like these people are becoming Orthodox. But once you have shul on Zoom, why do you have to go to shul anymore? And I don't have to go to my own shul. I'll go to see Elliot Cosgrove at the Park East, or I'll go to Angela Buchtal and the City Reform Shul. You know what I mean by shul? I'll go to these great rabbis. You know, once I'm on Zoom, what difference does it make? So it happened to be, see, that is where something where public policy, I think, is very important. You could argue halachically at the time, whatever heterim you have, but what is going to be the impact? And that's what the more concerned. What's the impact of your decision? So that's why halacha is not a science. It's an art. It's an art and a science. So yes, sometimes you do have to be concerned with what others say. Where do you draw the line? I think today we've gone overboard. We're a little bit too concerned with what others are going to say. But that's all that this. It's late. That's what Tisha B'Av is all about. You read the famous story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. The last line, Zechariah ben Akulas, right, is the reason the rabbis say caused the destruction, because when they wanted to kill Bar Kamsa, or they wanted to sacrifice the animal he gave that had a little defect. So Rabbi Shema Yamru, people will say. He was concerned what people would say, and that caused the destruction of the temple. The people will say you can bring a defective animal to the Mizbeach, which is, and he didn't want that, even though in the circumstances it was a dumb move not to bring the sacrifice the Romans offered. If you know what I'm talking about, if not, you can ask me. Remember that's the famous story where Bar Kamsa was mad. They threw him out of the party. So he told the Romans they're rebelling, and the Romans sent an animal, and then Bar Kamsa put a little nick on the animal that made it invalid according to Jewish law. And the rabbis, they caught on. They knew what was going on. So they said, okay, what can we do? We're not going to fight with the Romans. We'll offer this animal. And Rav Zechariah ben Akulas said, no. People will say you're allowed to bring invalid animals. And Mar says, because of him, the temple was destroyed. So you're right. If you're too concerned what people are going to say, you're going to destroy the temple. Okay, everybody.
Is the Al HaTshuva in English too?
Yes, Al HaTshuva is in English from many years ago. It's called On Repentance. Yes, you can buy it in English. Somebody can probably put it in the chat box. Yeah, you can buy Al HaTshuva in English. Now, even in Hebrew, it's in translation. I don't read it in the original. It was given in Yiddish. Al HaTshuva was given in Yiddish. Pinchas Peli put it into English, into Hebrew, and then it got translated into English. It's the fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mechila and Selicha, at a funeral, they asked about the mace Mechila. So why do they do that there?
Because Mechila means if I did anything wrong to the person who passed away, I don't exactly know what that means.
How do you know if they're going to be forgiven?
It's a little bit too late. Like once they were
right.
All right, I think we do it for ourselves. That we should think.
That's true. That's true. You get it off your conscience, right?
Not really the person. The person can't really. You have to go tempt people to the grave. You're right. You're doing it for yourself. That you shouldn't do it. Okay, who here hasn't registered for the Tisha B'Av program yet? You don't have to raise your hand. But
they're not sending me emails. I'm not getting emails from you anymore. I don't know why. I left two messages on the phone.
I have no idea why. I assume
I left two messages on the phone.
I don't know, I don't know. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's probably your server is blocking it. There's no reason. Or maybe
I cleaned it out. I cleaned out the server thing.
I don't know what to tell you. Send me an email. I can look into it. Resubscribe.
Okay.
Use a different email. Use a Gmail account. I think they're better. What can I tell you? But if you haven't registered, please do so. And I mean,
yes.
I think it's whatever 8 hours of learning. And,
I'm getting it from someone else because I don't want to miss it.
Yeah. But it's a different. It's not the same login. We do it as
it's
totally separate program. So it's you have to register. If you have a problem, email us. Okay.
Okay, fine.
All right, everybody. Shabbat shalom. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Shabbat.
Okay. Good Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.